Hello, and welcome back to the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson, and I'm just starting season 2. And hopefully, I'm going to make it through another 20 episodes. I don't really have long term plans for this podcast, but I do have a list of subjects that I still want to talk about. And this episode, I just kind of want to go over my current state of my career and also why I'm doing this podcast. I never really explained it. It was sort of a thing that I kind of had thought about before. But the reason I'm doing this is primarily because I've been trying to start over as a writer. I used to be an animator. And so my focus is on speaking and writing. And basically, how I write now is by speaking. So the line between speaking and writing has already been blurred. And now that we're in this age of AI, it's getting even more blurry. I'm overlapping these different worlds of video editing and writing and editing, writing, and so on. So it's all kind of the same thing. It's sort of like a podcast or Substack. And I do get burned out on internet stuff. I don't like being online all the time. Because of how I work, I have to be on the computer a lot. And part of what has helped me mentally, physically, health wise has been plants and working with plants. And that's why I took a break over the summer because I really wanted to spend as much time as I could outside. I did work briefly for a sustainable food company. That didn't work out, but it did get my head in the game about what kind of work can be done now. And I'm actually hoping to start my own small business in the spring, which would be for sustainable gardening, permaculture, and landscape design. If you're listening to this and you're in the prairies or maybe even just in North America, the idea has come from quite a few years of wanting to start a plant company of some kind. I was kind of thinking about culinary herbs for a while, then into medicinal herbs and seeds, also hybrid seeds, indigenous plants. I have quite a few overlapping interests with plants, and my housemate Omar is a certified permaculture designer. And I thought, hey, why don't I go into business with him and get started on a company where we're actually helping people to design their gardens so that they are basically ecologically friendly. It can be for food security, it can be for aesthetics. The main thing is that as a human being, we are working with our ecological niche and creating gardens and green spaces that work with the ecosystem where we are living. And that idea has kind of grown now. And working for a small company made me think, oh, maybe I could just start my own company too. And so that idea has been rattling around. So if you are in the area, like I would just be very curious to see who is looking for some help designing their gardens. I know I've had quite a lot of experience with small scale gardening, especially container gardening. I rented for years and years, and every year I tried to put together these barrels and bins and pots outside, and often very small spaces with balconies or small patios or small yards, and trying to make the best of it because sometimes you just don't know where you're going to end up, but you still have to make every effort. Like everywhere I've lived, I've tried as much as possible to get new plants in the ground if I can, or at least to get them out in pots. And working with native species, working with food plants has really been just so important for me. And I think it's so important for everyone else because we just don't know what's happening next. You know, the global situation is very unstable. I never imagined food security to become such a big issue in Canada as it has been. It's sort of gone from, you know, a situation where certain number of people without a lot of money have often gone without proper food, to the place now where even those people that are kind of struggling at the bottom are struggling to even get any help. I never imagined the food banks would be like going empty for a while. And, I think things are kind of slowing down a bit. I know certain changes have happened. We had a massive population boom after the pandemic, and it really, really affected everyone. It kind of confirmed for me that population issues are really, really serious. And the fact is, we all eat similar things as each other as human beings. We also eat things that other animals eat that like being around us. So the gardening for me has really been such a big deal. The botany as well. I'm just working on finishing a course. I kind of put it aside. Working more on doing botany courses and understanding botany, ethnobotany, permaculture. There's so many overlapping philosophies and ideas when you get into gardening. It can be kind of like overload. I think what I did for years is just pile in the information, just learn more and more and more and more. And this last year or two, I've kind of just like changed because I've never owned property before. So I've never had a long term relationship with a piece of land. And, growing up, my parents were not big into gardening. And I was, so I always had my like little corner in the yard. And now it's the whole yard. So it's kind of incredible. Like we now have a plan, a 5-year plan. Omar did a whole plan for the property, which was really impressive. A lot of going over lighting, water, wind, topography, how everything flows through your area. All the stuff that plants need, all the stuff that affect us as well, especially if you're looking at using solar energy, especially if you're trying to reclaim water and collect water in a rain barrel, for example, or irrigation systems. All of those are so important to understand. And that's what I want to help people with. As far as my expertise, the thing that I got really good at over the years and where my knowledge has increased so much is companion planting. When you're working in container gardens, companion planting is everything because each container is kind of its own mini ecosystem. And so you want to have plants that like each other, that work with each other. Companion planting is so complicated when you really get into it. And of course, we have the most famous tradition, which was an indigenous to the Americas, which was called Milpa or Three Sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash. And others have sort of come to be known, like tomatoes and basil, tomatoes and carrots. There's a lot of different companion or not companions. There are plants that seem to not like each other very much. And it can be for so many different reasons, whether it's chemistry or pests or shade or structure. There are a lot of different reasons why different plants can be planted next to each other. But what I've learned the most over the last year and what I kind of wanted to share after spending more time in the garden, and really didn't do a lot of gardening this year. It was mostly digging rocks so that we could move a pathway because I have a rock garden, not a regular space at all. It's all covered in rocks and cement tiles. So we're moving rocks around to move the cement tiles around to create a pathway rather than these sort of separate little patios, which is how they had set it up before, the previous owners. So it's really a reclamation project. I feel it has to do with bringing the ecosystem back. A lot of what was done before was kind of artificial. There's that feeling of separation from the land. We've got layers of landscaping, fabric, and rocks and cement kind of over everything. So we're just moving that all around. Luckily, it's not permanent. It's kind of like a giant puzzle, and trying to figure out a way to make the flow better. So that's also better for us and better for the plants. And that's one of those things that you have to get in the mindset of is ecosystems are complex. And that's why there's so many gardening philosophies, agriculture, horticulture, regenerative agriculture, organic gardening. The lines between gardening, agriculture, and everything is just so blurry. And I think everyone kind of will develop their own philosophy of gardening. And it's just like this accumulation of so much knowledge. And botany, in addition to that, is even more knowledge, more awareness. But sometimes you can get just like almost frozen in too much information. If you start reading on the internet about different foods you can forage and you start kind of freaking out about what's poisonous, what's not, and like trying to identify everything. I still haven't identified all of the plants that we're growing already in the yard. Some of them I'm still not sure what they are, but if they're kind of keeping to themselves and doing their own thing, then I don't bother them. There's really only one plant that I can think of that we just fully got rid of. I mean, other than some of the invasives like the sow thistle, which is just everywhere. Unfortunately, this year, a different kind of thistle just took over. I have so many thistles now, and they're quite annoying, especially if they get burrs that get into the dog's fur. So one single plant that we cut down, and actually we didn't even kill it, we just cut it down. It came back, and it kind of had all of the things that you don't want in a plant that might be getting in the way. So it's foreign, it's not edible, it's grown in a space where it's shading out a bunch of other plants that need sunlight. It's growing right on the water line. So all of those reasons. Also, it had a disease. So all of those kind of things are what you kind of want to take into account with plants. Like, I'm not really a believer in just coming in and like wiping everything out and starting over. I know some people have that philosophy. If you really care about the ecosystems, then you really have to keep with the what I think my philosophy is, like interfere the least possible with other species, even with other people. I mean, I think that's sort of the way to stay out of trouble and to have the least impact. When we talk about ecology, a lot of people don't get that just doing nothing can sometimes be the best option. When you look at commercial agriculture, they talk a lot about productivity and they want to get maximum productivity out of this bit of land, and everything is about maximizing profit. But the fact is that doesn't work with the ecosystems at all, and it can actually work against you in a big way. The fact is the markets are fluctuating so much. They're very fickle. The fact is if you have high quality food, you're going to find it easier to get a market than if you're making really low quality food that just happens to be a lot of it. Like, it won't matter in the end. Like, people will give you less money for it, and eventually people will get sick of that quality, especially if we're competing internationally with other countries that are maybe not as colonized as here and actually appreciate their food traditions and actually are following older systems that often incorporate ecological management and regenerative agriculture already. It wasn't until we transitioned into this high maintenance, high interference type of agriculture that we started seeing a lot more ecological impact from that. And the fact is that the way that people make money off of that just isn't sustainable into the future. Like, I just don't see that as a productive way to continue doing agriculture. Unfortunately, in Canada, it's become really clear to me that a lot of the agricultural laws are written by producers. They're written by the people that want to sell they're written in such a way that allows them to corner the market in a way that I can only really describe as monopoly. That there's a monopolization of it's just not even individual companies now, but associations, industrial associations. But if we want food security in Canada, if we want it globally, we really, really have to focus on better ecosystem integration. The fact is, you shouldn't have to worry about high productivity. I mean, think about the indigenous perspective when you go out and forage. You never take more than a third. You leaving another third for other animals that want to eat it, and another third so that the plant can regenerate. Can you imagine if we applied that to our agricultural systems? We would only ever try to have a 33% productivity. That's pretty low, but maybe that's better. There's times with some of the plants, and I noticed this before too, especially when you start getting into permaculture or larger gardening or with families or a large group of people, you're growing all kinds of things, and some of those things are not your favorite food. So what do you do if you already have, say, like a giant patch of rhubarb? And I'm not a massive rhubarb fan. So I'm kind of wondering what to do about that, for example. And I think if you look at this high productivity, it's like you're just maximizing everything. And I think some homesteaders do that. I'm impressed. I'm amazed at how much they get done, canning so many things. I think for me, what I have found works better is more diversity rather than a higher number of one kind of plant. I would like to grow more legumes though, because you do need a fair amount just to have one meal. When you're growing beans, like a handful of beans isn't really going to do it for a meal. But a lot of the other plants, I realize, like, I don't want to spend all this time canning. Freezing, maybe. Freezing's pretty easy. Drying's okay. I don't mind the drying. Certain plants are definitely better at drying than others. And that's just kind of how I roll. Like, I don't really want to be a homesteader. And maybe you're someone living in the city, you just want some snacks around. You want something to sort of help you with some of your food intake. But the fact is, if you get into this full-time agricultural lifestyle, like a farmer, like a homesteader, it's a lot of work. It's pretty much your whole life. Like, that's your full-time job, is going out and checking on your plants and making sure everything is good, the soil, the water, and so on. And you're thinking about it and you're planning it all the time. And then you have these big harvesting times. Our economics should be based almost completely on ecology. Ecology and geology, and of course, all of the things that we have in our environment, not just the organics, but inorganic materials as well. That should be a part of our economic thinking so that we never, ever would try to take something from the environment that we know cannot be regenerated easily. And we would never take too much of those things that we know that will take longer to regenerate than that we're taking from it. And that's where we've really gone wrong. And I think a lot of people don't have a good sense of why that is and what to do about it. And, coming back to the idea of interference, like where people get a lot of things in the environment and ecology wrong is this idea that you have to act and you have to do and you have to change things. And that's the interference mentality. That mentality is just off base because we need to actually do less. The best that you can do for the environment is actually less. The best way you can be positive for the environment is not actively, it's actually passively. It's actually doing less landscaping, less yard work, actually. Once you start to understand how much nature does on its own and how much these other creatures that we share this planet with are using the same space as us, you start to realize that a lot of this, our influence in agriculture, should really be just in order so that we can sort of get what we want and at the same time reduce our own impact. It's just like a lot of animal rescues. Most of the time, what they're spending their time doing is saving animals from stuff that we've done, saving them from these manholes. They fall into the gutter all the time, or they get caught up in nets, or they get caught up in power lines, or they get hit by cars. So much of what we're saving animals from is ourselves. And if we just tried to interfere less, then that would be beneficial for everyone. And it is also so much easier for us. I think in this age when so much has become toxic and so much has become overwhelming and all this technology is just leading to mental exhaustion with people, and apathy is what sets in. And a lot of times activists are like, we can't be empathetic, we've got to, and it's the same thing. It's like maybe apathy is exactly what nature is doing to us to stop us from destroying everything. And we just let it go. And we're just like, you know what? We can't control everything. Sometimes if you don't have the time to process a whole bunch of this plant food and you don't even really like it, maybe it is better to let the other creatures eat it. And what I've decided to do with that rhubarb is we'll eat a little bit of it and I'm going to take the rest to the food bank. And I think anything that I grow in my garden now that's extra that I don't really want, I'm going to take that to the food bank. That's sort of my big decision this year. And I think that's a good idea for other gardeners. And I think the food banks are getting more open to taking food in from the community. And I really hope that we switch our economy so that that kind of thing will be more normalized. Because one of the biggest things I wondered when I started researching into starting a company was, why are there so many varieties that I can buy of seeds for different types of tomatoes and amaranth and tobacco, like all these different amazing plants, black tomatoes, tiny tomatoes, giant tomatoes, different colors of amaranth, different kinds of spinach. And you go to the grocery store and it's like 2 types of tomatoes and that's it. And 1 type of amaranth and 1 type of this. Maybe there's a few different kinds of rice because that's a more common one. But a lot of times what you're seeing is just the same old in the grocery store. And then in the gardening store, there's like 10 times more variety. Why is this biodiversity of our food plants that people are already growing in their own gardens not being represented in the grocery store? Something's amiss. And I think that comes back to what I was saying about the agricultural companies who are planting monocultures, who are planting one type of thing, dominating the government legal system so that it actually makes it harder to start selling new varieties of common foods or even new hybrids, because the hybrid system, which I got really interested in, and I got a little bit disillusioned when I started reading all the rules because they want you to kind of register each and every new type of plant. But the fact is, nature creates new varieties all the time, new hybrids, new mutations. Like, that's evolution. So our system of economics isn't following ecology, it's not following evolution, it's not following all these basic scientific principles that we now understand about biology. It's not following indigenous culture at all, which has hundreds to thousands of years of experience on this land working with a lot of the food plants that we're already eating. So we're missing out on so much intelligence in our culture because of this messed up economic system that unfortunately gets pushed and prodded mostly by industry and often for very, very short-sighted and short-term profit incentives, monopoly incentives, instead of encouraging as much, not just novelty, but just small businesses, small agricultural businesses. Someone like myself, like pretty much anybody that's growing a garden with food in it should have a very easy avenue to pass on any extra harvest that they have. It should be so easy, and yet it's not. And the normal ways that people do it nowadays, they maybe go online. Hey, does anybody want any more crab apples, whatever it is, zucchinis? And, people may take it, they may not. But that system just like doesn't make sense. Like that's why we have a complex economy with money, and that's why people want money and not just charity, because charity you don't get to choose, money you get to choose. Money gives you the power to choose, and just giving stuff away, the bartering system, really limits what people want. Maybe there are people that really want those crab apples and zucchinis. They're just not in your location right then. They're not online right then. Maybe they're not online at all. So they're just not aware that you have that available because they are working. Maybe they're making money. They go to the grocery store. They don't know. Really, those grocery stores should be full of local gardeners' produce. That's what should be happening. It shouldn't be that hard to register a small business that just occasionally has some extra produce. And it's the same thing with energy. When you look at the energy grid and how that works, is there's always like a few big producers of energy, and they just pay it off to everyone else. And the big head honchos in those companies make a lot of money, and everybody at the bottom just spends money. But what if you have your own solar panels, your own wind turbines that are very small, and you have them on your property and you're making this extra energy? You should also be able to give that energy into the system. There are some places that are allowing that, and unfortunately a lot of them are not. And why? Because of those big head honchos at the top that are monopolizing the system. So we need really more than just democracy. And I bring that up. I just voted yesterday in Alberta for the municipal election. But it's worth doing. And I think what we need more than just democracy in the government is we need democracy in everyday life. We need to change our whole economic system to reflect an ecological reality. Reality. People forget about reality so much. This is what's so twisted about being human, is that our brains have developed so much that we can imagine entire universes full of things that don't exist, and we've created it all in our heads. And then people start believing in those universes that don't exist. They start believing in ideologies that have no basis in reality. They start believing in religions that are these twisted versions of history that should belong in history lessons and not in spirituality or philosophy or whatever we have imposed them on. I want to be starting this company for landscaping design. Right now, like I said, we're still working on the landscaping of the yard, so moving things around so that we can open up more spaces to actually put more plants in. This year I focused on greens, beans, and herbs because I realized if you are a low maintenance gardener, you don't have a lot of space and you don't have a lot of time, beans and greens are the best because you can actually eat the leaves of the bean plants. All the bean plants have edible leaves. And of course, protein is great. And also what I like about beans is that they grow and they mature fairly quickly. So I've had really good success at growing beans and legumes through one season, whereas things like tomatoes and zucchinis and cucumbers, they often conflict with our short growing season here in Canada. You start getting weird shapes, and like we had to actually take a whole bunch of green tomatoes off because the frost was coming and it was getting quite a bit colder, and they can't survive that. And that can be real trouble for people that want to grow their own food. If you want to know what to grow, I would say greens. Greens are the best because as soon as they come out of the ground, you can eat them. You can overplant, and then you can cultivate all of these microgreens. You can cut a bunch of the small ones and you let some of the bigger ones grow. And that's just a good way to get some nutrition if you're looking for a little extra. I used to not like greens at all when I was a kid. I was really picky. And now I absolutely love them. And I think that they're just so important. You don't have to eat them all on their own. You can put them in an omelet. You can put them in a soup. You can put them in a salad. Like there's so many different ways to eat different greens, spinach, kale, arugula, And then onions. Onions aren't the easiest to grow, but I found this amazing onion this year. It's called a walking onion or an Egyptian walking onion. Which is funny, like when you think about an onion walking like an Egyptian. Anyway, they don't really walk quite like that, but they're quite cool because they grow up and then they grow bulbs on the end like a flower, and then they also grow flowers. It's very strange. It's like they grow a whole new onion on the end of the onion until that onion gets big enough that it falls to the ground. And that's why they call it a walking onion, because it keeps growing like that. And you can eat all the different parts of the plant. So walking onions. That's just a few ideas for people out there that might be listening that are struggling to make ends meet and want to start growing their own food. A lot of people start tomatoes and then it's like you have to wait so long for the tomatoes and you don't always get them. I'm really glad we got tomatoes, but we did start them from a plant. I didn't start them from seed this year. I think I'm going to come back and keep talking about plants and keep growing plants and start that company. So please, if you're listening and you're interested in plants, keep following and keep posted. The name of the company, I already have the name, Rock Seed Herbs. And that's going to be sort of the permaculture or sustainable gardening, as I'm calling it, because permaculture is an excellent philosophy, but I think that I also want to focus on smaller scale. Again, people that might just have a balcony and maybe you have a bunch of pots and you're like, what am I going to plant here if I want to grow a little bit of food, or pollinators for other species. It doesn't have to be only for food as well. So yeah, just keep your eye on this podcast and also on YouTube, Twitter, X. I'm on Blue Sky. Mostly I go by Kimby Dale, Kimbdayle. That's usually my handle on most of those. Also on TikTok. I'm really enjoying TikTok. I'm kind of shocked at how much I'm enjoying it. I'm always a resistor with social media. Like I never am the first one to jump on board. I'm like, okay, I'll watch how this goes. I have no faith in any social media at all or anything online. But I have to say TikTok has really impressed me with how many people are on there working with plants, showing their foraging and their ethnobotany knowledge, local plants. It's just been incredible. I'm so grateful for finding some of these content creators. I'm going to do a little blurb on TikTok for my book. So follow me on any of those venues if you are online. I want to thank everyone who's listening to this podcast. Please feel free to share it if you've enjoyed this at all. Like I said, I'm just going to do another season of 20 episodes and then I'm probably going to wrap it up. It's been fun. This has been my outlet for these ideas that I had. Like I said, I would have done this in essay form, but I didn't really know where I was going to publish it. And so I thought, why not just talk? Why not just do this part? Also, my book, Dreaming Life's Language. I now have a new edition. Unfortunately, the self-publisher didn't pull through for me, so I haven't gotten paid from them. This is my new edition, Dreaming Life's Language. That is through Lulu, which is a direct publishing company. They're pretty awesome. Honestly, they were really easy to work with. I kind of like my cover better than the other one. It's a little bit cheaper. I think I made it about 50 cents cheaper than the other one. Dreaming Life's Language by Kim D. Anderson. And that's on Lulu. That's also on Apple Books. It used to be iBooks. That's the built-in app on Macs and Apple computers, iPhones. And you can download it there. I'm also going to be working on an audiobook pretty soon. I don't have this soundproofed yet. I'm going to be working on that over the next few months. Probably by around Christmas, New Year, hopefully I will have the audiobook done. That's kind of the timeline I'm looking at. And I will see you again soon. I'm going to continue on with the next episode. Probably every couple weeks like I was doing it before. That's kind of the flow that I've got for 20 more episodes. So this has been the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson. I'll see you later.